Welcome everyone. What we have in store for today is talking about a few things that are coming in patch 10.1.5. In this new patch we have two things that can give us pretty juicy loot. One are the time rifts and the other is the new Megadungeon. Now, what comes with the new Megadungeon are some pretty juicy, pretty interesting new trinkets. Now, if you're wondering, but isn't the new Megadungeon gonna be just some lower item level activity? Don't we have to wait for a full season before the Megadungeon gets turned into a Mythic Plus activity? Like it happened with Karazhan in Legion, it happened with Mechagon in BFA, it happened with Tazavesh in Shadowlands, so why should we care? Because very often in those dungeons, even before getting their Mythic Plus version, they did have still items that specs and classes still went for, even if they had a lower item level. Even though very likely the new items available in the Megadungeon won't have the hero upgrade line in 10.1.5, so they won't go all the way up to 441 or higher. Even if they stop one upgrade track below, like at 437 for example, even if they stop lower in the item level that you can upgrade them, they might still be very powerful. And we have for us today 5 different trinkets that will become available in the next Megadungeon. Starting with, for our first trinkets from the Megadungeon, the Echoing Tear Stone, which is a healer trinket. Activate the Tear Stone, recording 30% of your healing done in the next 10 seconds, and then, whenever one of your allies falls below 35% HP, the stored healing is going to automatically be released and heal the target, which fell below 35% health, and nearby allies for the stored amount, plus granting them haste as well. It's interesting, especially the more important thing to know about this trinket is just how many players will be able to be affected by the proc of the heal. Are we talking about 3 nearby allies? Are we talking about 5? Or are we talking about an entire raid? This could vary in terms of power. Now, considering the cooldown is 2 minutes, it's likely that it's gonna be more than just a few allies. It will likely be a wider number. So overall, this trinket is likely still perhaps not nearly as powerful in the raid, given that, you know, people dropping below 35% HP is going to happen very often in the raid. It's very unlikely that you will be able to time this for a particular moment in the raid, given how often this damage comes. In Mythic Plus, this might be more useful. It might actually save a certain player dropping low in HP, so this seems to be slightly better in Mythic Plus to have a good use out of. Now, talking about making good use out of, we are back with one of the more beloved tank trinkets since quite a while ago, the Cheat Death Trinket. Prophetic Stone Scales is going to give a tank a cheat death. On top of that, when the cheat death procs, you are healed to full HP. On top of that, the enemies that hit you in the last 10 seconds before proccing the cheat death are also going to be doing 20% less damage to you. On top of that, you're also gaining a pretty big haste steroid. Now, once more, the numbers in here are kind of iffy. I doubt you're gonna get a 14,562 haste buff. That would be kind of big, to be fair. But still, the basis is super strong for a tank. Number 1, you get healed to full HP, so it's a massive heal on top of getting a cheat death. Number 2, you gain a 20% damage reduction cooldown as well. So on top of not dying, you're also getting a damage reduction, and on top of that, you're also gaining more haste for 12 seconds. Yes, obviously the cooldown is 8 minutes, but we have seen it before. We have seen in previous seasons other cheat death trinkets with long cooldowns, and still many tanks use them a lot. They are useful, they are still very useful in the raid. When you are trying to progress, you want to limit the amount of wipes, so as a tank dying is a pretty bad thing in the raid, so it's good to use this in the raid to allow you to more easily progress, and of course it's much more powerful as well in Mythic Plus, because there a tank dying is actually a really big problem. So this one being quite good in Mythic Plus might be a very good chase item for tanks in 10.1.5. Now on to the DPS trinkets. So the first one is the weirdest one, the wackiest one, the Time Thief's Gambit. So you activate this to give yourself a whole bunch of haste for 15 seconds. So up to this point, it's a pretty standard trinket. Main stat and a big haste on use every 2 minutes. Pretty standard. Where things enter the fuckery territory is in the follow-up. Once you give yourself the haste buff, you trigger a paradox which will happen to you 2 minutes in the future. If the paradox arrives, you will be frozen in time, stunned, and unable to move or have any action done for 5 seconds. The only way you can stop this paradox from happening is if you're killing mobs, further extending the timing of when the paradox will arrive by 15 seconds, or by defeating a major enemy, completely restoring the timeline. Obviously, we don't have that many details on this trinket and what it might actually mean. Obviously, this is self-explanatory, is very good in Mythic Plus and basically terrible in the raid, because this trinket will function upon killing many enemies, meaning it's great for Mythic Plus. Also, it's very likely that normal enemies, the normal elites in a Mythic Plus key will count as the 15-second cooldown reduction, while the bosses of a Mythic Plus key will restore the timeline. Then you have the question of what does restoring the timeline completely mean? Does restoring the timeline mean the paradox is completely removed? Or does it mean it goes back to 2 minutes and restarts the countdown from 2 minutes? We also don't technically know what cooldown does this trinket have. What happens if you use this the first time, you create the first paradox, you are able to extend the arrival of the paradox past 2 minutes, and then you use this trinket again. Are you going to have multiple paradoxes timing down on you at the same time? Or does defeating a boss just gets rid of all of these paradoxes at once? We still don't know precisely. However, this one being a pretty big haste buff on demand might be very well liked and demanded by many of the specs that can benefit from this much haste. However, this is intellect only, so it's only the haste-based spec for range DPS, not for the melee DPS that might want a trinket like this. Talking about melee DPS only, the next trinket, the Accelerating Sandglass, is going to be a strength or agility only trinket. This, however, is much more simple. Your auto attacks can give you stacking haste up to 15 times. Once you reach 15, your next auto attack will empty all of the stacks, doing a whole bunch of damage based on the stacks you had. And then you reset the cycle and you continue again. So this one obviously seems very likely to be better for specs with faster auto attacks, for specs with more haste, specs that scale with haste and get to attack more and get to trigger this trinket more. We don't know precisely about the RPPM. We don't know if this one has a fixed proc chance, meaning even if you are a slow auto attacker it won't change, or if it does, scale with haste and with the speed of your auto attacks, then dual wielding specs are likely going to want this trinket much more than two-handed specs, but it seems like a pretty simple and pretty straightforward type of trinket. Definitely not nearly as convoluted and complex as the intellect trinket we just looked at. The last one of the trinkets, which is likely still going to be for DPS players, is the Mirror of Fractured Tomorrows. It's a 3-minute cooldown which spawns a future version of yourself for 20 seconds to do extra damage to your target. On top of that, you give yourself a whole bunch of your highest secondary stat. What's interesting about this? This is a flat damage increase, much like other trinkets that can do a whole bunch of damage with one click, while also giving you a secondary stat. What also makes this unique is the fact that it's a 3-minute cooldown. Many others, / most other trinkets that do this type of extra damage increase have a 2-minute cooldown, sometimes even a 90-second cooldown. Meanwhile, this one is much beefier. So it might be more useful for specs with longer cooldown, specs with 3-minute big burst cooldowns, where they would be able to better time and better line up their burst windows with a 3-minute cooldown trinket. That would make it easier for them. So this one is more big cooldown centric compared to another trinket we just saw, like the Accelerating Sunglass, which is more for like all-purpose use, constant damage going on throughout your rotation. Now, as I said, all of these trinkets coming from a Megadungeon means they want to be on the same upgrade track of the Mythic raid gear or even the Mythic Plus gear at the highest level. So they will have a lower item level than the top gear you can get right now, but still, it won't mean that some of these effects won't be powerful enough to be looked after, to be sought after by many of the specs right now. Especially as we looked at it, especially the tank trinket, with the cheat death mechanic will likely be the more powerful of these trinkets that we have seen so far. Waiting, of course, pending any future tuning to the numbers of these trinkets for the other roles. But for now, that's what we have as far as 10.1.5 and upcoming Megadungeon trinkets. We still have a few trinkets to look at. We will look at them in the next videos. The trinkets coming from the time rifts, which will come from a different activity and likely not be as powerful as these trinkets, but we will see why. We will see why soon. So for today, though, we can stop here. Thanks, of course, as usual, to all of the Patreon supporters for the contribution and the help to the growth of the channel. You can still support in plenty of other free ways. As usual, you can like and comment down below on this video, as well as subscribe to the channel itself. That would be greatly appreciated, especially given how simple it is to just click one mouse button. It's not that much of an effort. Lastly, of course, you can still follow me over on my Twitter, as well as follow me over on my stream on Twitch. So with these things out of the way, thank you guys, of course, for watching. See you guys soon, and in the meantime, I just hope they are kept strong, like strong enough to give you a reason to go and hunt these trinkets in the new Megadungeon, right? Just enough.